That's not how astrology sessions go. They're so affirming
Yeah.
of things that people already know about themselves. It's just like highlighting it amidst the noise, kind of.
Yeah.
So more of the feedback is, oh, yeah, like I totally hear what you're saying, and just this perfect example flowing out. So it's something they already knew about themselves, similar to I already know about myself, but it like through the tool of focusing on one piece and using that to speak to this very specific like clue or code to the best way forward, just like puts a spotlight or a flashlight on something that was already there.
Hello and welcome back to the Joyous Path to Millions podcast. This episode you're going to love, especially if you want to reinvent your business, if you're going through a pivot, you're spiritual and you're wondering how to integrate the woo into your work. So welcome to the show. I'm your host, Emily June Wilcox. I'm a serial entrepreneur, 7-figure business owner, creator of the Money Wound Medicine program, an author, a mama of 2, living life in Southern California. And I'm on a mission to put more money in the hands of soulpreneurs through healing money wounds, through building abundant businesses, through balancing masculine and feminine energy. I fully believe that when we do this, we up-level the frequency of the planet and we usher in new paradigm wealth. I am so honored to be walking the joyous path to millions together with you. And today I'm joined by Lauren Poppins Raye, CEO of Cosmic Biz Witch. She's a former tax preparer turned business astrologer and mentor, here to help self-employed creators to align their work and currency flow with their unique design and the timing of their cosmic cycles. She uses the tools of a person's astrology chart, tech magic, and stellar systems to support online business owners in embracing their money, tech, and cosmic gifts to build their way to abundance and fulfillment. Lauren, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Emily. It's awesome to be here.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have you. And I feel like I love these conversations that are at the intersection of just like energetics and spirituality and woo and money. And it's your story is so fascinating to me because we think, and I think of tax preparers as just like very buttoned up, like hard nosed, by the numbers, the facts are the facts kind of people. And here you are sitting in front of me and you've got like purple and teal streaks in your hair. And you obviously are so tapped into the unseen realms. So can you just share a little bit more about your journey and how it all unfolded?
Yeah, absolutely. The answer to the puzzle of why I was a tax preparer when I don't look like one is that my dad was a CPA. And I played in his office when I was little. As soon as I was old enough to, I supported him. I had a part-time job with him, supporting his clients with tax returns and bookkeeping. So I lived and breathed that world my whole life. Yeah. And meanwhile, I was very well connected through a decade-long chapter in my life of living in a van and exploring myself through psychedelics and going to festivals. So I had this network of very alternative, multi-passionate, self-employed people that didn't fit into this world in any of the usual channels. And so I was bred to be like a double agent, basically, that could speak the language of the creatives that I surrounded myself with, but also was fluent in the world of finance and taxes and managing money flow legitimately, which is something that people in that world did not know a lot about and were rather avoidant of and fearful of if it weren't for me being the way shower to help them to embrace those things in their business. So it really was like a match made in heaven, I think, because of who and how I am that doesn't fit that mold, that I was able to help a really big and influential community of people to cultivate their gifts in a very like grounded and legitimate and profitable way through embracing the rules of this world and money.
That's so fun because I think if I were to just read your bio, I would imagine like this really siloed way of living. where it's, oh, I have this closeted spiritual side of me, but then I'm at work and it's more buttoned up. But you're like, no, I'm taking all the people who, if I tried to speak to them in normal like CPA speak or bookkeeping language, would just run for the hills. And it seemed like you were able to just bring all of yourself into every piece of it, which is so fun.
Absolutely, because a big part of being a tax preparer, particularly for people who have various traumas or avoidance patterns with that realm of things, I was like a therapist too. Like they would pour their heart out to me once they finally came to me about what had been in the way for them. Yeah. And so like I couldn't help but bring astrology into all of it. We'd look at their chart, we'd talk about what about their path, why they do what they do, why they came to me when they did. And it just made for a really like fun and connected and interesting layer as they're having to do the quote boring part of being in compliance and tending their money flow.
I'm obsessed with that. Did you bump into any limiting beliefs as you were deciding to let go of the tax preparation, like part of your business, and just go all in on astrology? Because I think often we feel like we have more evidence of people wanting to pay for this, I don't know, like more tangible services or like more transactional. It's your taxes. You have to do them. So of course people will pay for that, but astrology is optional. I'm just curious if any of that was living rent free in your head for a while.
Yeah, there were a lot of surprising limiting beliefs that bubbled up when I made this pivot, because when I was a tax preparer, like you said, people have to do their taxes. And on top of that, I was the only person in a very big community of people that they would even consider. Somebody would make a Facebook post asking, hey, I need help with my taxes. And I would get like 6 texts. It was just so easy. Like I didn't even have to advertise or promote myself. Yeah. There was just this referral engine and the money came easy and abundantly, seasonally throughout the year. When the time came to let it go, it was just such a timely and magical transition, like how supported I felt when I finally was able to say out loud what felt like a really scary thing to let go of something that felt so established and was the reason that I experienced such easy abundance. But when I said it out loud, it was just nothing but support and affirmation. And honestly, within a month of saying it out loud, like I found the people that were ready to take it over for me. The transition was really easy. It was just absolutely frictionless. So I was riding on those coattails into the pivot into my new business. And admittedly, I was operating under a delusion that the transition into the new business would be just as seamless because I imagined that because the first program that I create and launched or relaunched, I had offered it in the past, was Cosmic Currency, which very much felt like a bridge between the two worlds for me and my offerings. It was a way to support people with their back end money management so that they weren't just coming to me once a year to wave a magic wand and fix their neglect each time during tax season. And so I really built that program for my current audience, my current client base. So I imagined that it would be a really seamless transition, that everybody that I was already working with would be really hungry to make that transition with me. And that's not exactly how it turned out, at least not in the way that I imagined it. So there was definitely like a humbling coming to terms with, oh, I am actually starting over. And so once I accepted that part of the transition, like I was very excited about what you're speaking to. I related it to the difference between like high school and college when it comes to education. Teachers in high school, they're teaching kids that have to be there, that don't have a choice. Whereas then you get to college and the vibe is so different. Everybody's choosing to be there. And it's just such a different vibe of the learning environment. I'm an academic nerd background, so that's fine. I loved college. And so I imagined that. I was like, oh, this is like, for me, like it's going to be so much better. While I am very suited to helping people and supporting people through this realm, like they'd rather not have to walk through. It's going to be so much cooler to be able to support people in places where we're both excited and they're choosing to be there. One of the biggest limiting beliefs that came up for me when I got into this space was so surprising to me because in every other area of my life, every non-business area of my life, and then my business before making this pivot, I have always been very good at the manifestation process and tuning into what I want and having absolutely no doubts whatsoever that it's on its way to me and things showing up really quickly. And that wasn't happening for this. And now, granted, it's the beginning. Things take time. There's all the kind of logical things around why that transition was other than I expected. But that said, I knew there was something more. I knew there was something deeper where something was really getting in the way for me of believing that it was going to work out with this new direction. And when it finally dawned on me, when I was finally able to see what that was, it just felt like such a liberation. Finally, I was like, see, I knew there was something. Like I was getting this advice of like practically, oh, you just need to do this, do that. And I'm like, no, it's not that. There's something in me that's standing in the way. And what that was is that when I started my tax practice with my dad as my mentor, one of the things that made that such a yes for as long as it was the relationship that it made possible between me and my dad.
Yeah.
And it was this space where he just lit up to mentor me. It was just like this match made in heaven arena for us. And during that time, whenever I would come to him with other things that I was working on, because I was an astrologer the whole time, there was, to your point of siloing, there was like what I did for money, which was taxes. And then there was like my social media accounts, which were all about us. And so whenever I would lean a little deeper into actually creating offering around the things that I was more passionate about, he would dim, he would lean out, like he didn't understand those things. And so there was a lot of contrast there. And the realization for me was, because I had that experience with him, it was almost like he was this personified what's outside of my control. There's my faith in myself, which has never been a problem because I was like a gifted and talented child and everybody always told me how smart I was and all this. So I knew that I was capable. But when it came to, then I would go to present to what's outside my control, my dad, in this case, in the past, the reaction was not like, it was not very well received in the way that it was doing my taxes, which was very well received. And so what I realized is now what's outside of my control, because my dad's no longer with us, is just other people receiving what I'm doing. And what made me notice it, which gave me the aha of that's what's been running the show here, is I would have other people close to me come to me excited about something they had been working on and they were about to launch. And I would hear this voice in the back of my head be, oh, that's going to be so sad when that doesn't work out, when you just get crickets. I was like, what? Once I could see it, that belief almost sabotaging other people, I realized that it had been sabotaging me. And it's just one of those little not so little details that once I was aware of it, everything started to change in terms of recrossing those wires of my faith in the universe and that I will be supported. Now being able to be applied to this new direction of my passion work that I wasn't able to pursue in the way that I am now.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought that up because it is fascinating. And I think it's the reason that entrepreneurship is like such a spiritual journey. And there is so much personal development and inner growth that happens because it's like all of a sudden you're getting this external feedback, right? It's a little slower. It's a little harder than I thought it was going to be. And if we have the fundamental belief that the external is always matching the internal, then it's okay, wait a second. So like, where is it in my internal environment that's a match for growing a little slower or it not being as well received? And it's nice when you're able to identify that and then start to move through it and cultivate a new inner environment and trust that then the external will match it. Do you, with the way that you read charts and everything, do you feel like you're able to really effectively apply it to yourself? Or is it something where like it's easier to read someone else's chart and tell them everything that's going on for them? You know what I'm asking?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that in the space of a session, I'm very focused on using the lens of the different pieces of their chart and how that indicates what will be in alignment for them or brings perspective to whatever they're sharing. I think for myself, I sometimes have to remind myself to focus on it so specifically. But that said, I've known my chart and been geeking out on astrology for so long, for 2 decades now, that it's just, if I'm not specifically focusing in and zeroing in on an aspect of my chart, it's such a big part in general of my lens of how I even know myself and my various threads of growth and my gifts. So it's just like this vague kind of ever present lens for myself. Whereas, but I'll have someone else in my life nudge me to actually focus in on, oh, that part of my chart playing out. And I blow my own mind in that moment. Like I would a client, oh yeah, like I saw it, but I wasn't thinking of it in that way. Oh, so good.
That's awesome. Yeah, it makes sense. Like it's a part of your perspective, like you said, like a part of the way that you know yourself. I was just curious because what I notice as a coach is it's so easy for me to just like intuitively tap into what's going on for one of my clients and just like channel for them. And I never feel like I'm lacking clarity. Like it's always so crystal clear and it feels so clean. But then if I were to turn that lens inward on myself, it's like there's not as much clarity.
I think it's like a testament to the power of the tool of astrology to what you're pointing to, because in the sessions, it's honestly so rare that I'm like speaking something where someone's, oh, I never thought of it that way. Yeah. That's not how astrology sessions go. They're so affirming of things that people already know about themselves. It's just like highlighting it amidst the noise kind of. Yeah. So more of the feedback is, oh yeah, like I totally hear what you're saying, and just this perfect example flowing out. So it's something they already knew about themselves, similar to I already know about myself, but it like through the tool of focusing on one piece and using that to speak to this very specific like clue or code to the best way forward, just like puts a spotlight or a flashlight on something that was already there. And then because you're paying attention to it and focusing and fixating on it, you allow it to guide you and lead you in a way that otherwise it might have just been like a background detail.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So I only know a little bit about astrology, but I know enough to know that there's like different camps of like Western astrology versus Vedic. So I'm just curious what your opinion is on that.
Happy to get right to the heart of the matter of the controversy in the field and speak directly to it. So what I like to say about that is, first of all, just looking at what the facts are around what make it different, because I think that takes a step back from any kind of like dogmatic, like right, wrong preferences. They really are just 2 different ways to map something that is not actually mappable in any kind of completely accurate way. So Vedic astrology is really cool because it's using the actual, like what we're actually seeing in the sky. Yeah. So it's using, because basically everything in the cosmos is constantly moving and expanding. So basically to map it, you have to pick some kind of an anchor and call it not moving. And then you're like looking at relatively how everything's moving according to that, because everything's moving.
That makes sense. So in essence, we're pretending that Earth isn't moving. Is that correct?
So in Vedic, the kind of fixed thing that they're using, the anchor, is the fixed stars of the constellations of the zodiac.
Okay.
And so what makes that really cool is you can look up in the sky and see that that reddish looking star, but Mars is like actually in front of a constellation. So you're like, oh, Mars is in that sign. Whereas the kind of fixed thing that we use in Western, which is the map model that I use, is we're using the seasons. So to your point, we're using Earth as our grounding point to say that the part of the sky that's rising in the east, the first day of spring, is Aries. And we map the sky accordingly. Now, where it gets tricky is because of the precession of the equinox, which is a fancy term for the Earth's tilt shifting, where that is in the sky relative to those constellations has been shifting. So it doesn't agree. Now, where it gets even trickier, and this is the part where I'm like, come on, guys, really? We use the same words.
Right.
They're using Aries and Taurus and Gemini for these constellations, and we're using those same words for these other parts of the sky that we're pointing to. And ultimately that's where it sounds like we're all just arguing and can't get along because one map it's in one constellation and with one map it's in another. All that to say, I think as long as you pick and stick to one map and you're consistent with that, the value is just the same.
So how do you work with your clients? Are they doing one-on-one sessions with you? Is it like a longer term engagement?
Yeah. So for the astrology sessions where I have two, I have one. So before I say the timing, this was one of the biggest shifts for me that came with pivoting what I'm focusing on in my business since becoming a mom is how I do sessions. And basically I have switched everything to asynchronous.
Nice.
Which for anyone listening that doesn't know what that is, basically we're talking like voices, right? Like leaving a voicey, returning a voicey, kind of Voxer style. I use Telegram. I'm obsessed with Telegram. And so and the feedback that I've gotten, I did it for myself at first because I didn't, as a new mama that was breastfeeding and tending to various things around the clock, I didn't actually know when I could be available. I couldn't commit to a particular time. And this was actually something that I had started implementing in my tax practice anyway. So it's like one of a list of many things that I officially changed after becoming a mom where I'm like, oh my goodness, why haven't I been doing this? Such a good shift. All that is holy for everything I have felt inspired to change since becoming a mom in my business. But yeah, they're all asynchronous containers and my clients love it. Like it is so great that we're able to show up. So basically I have my cosmic cash code session, which is how people typically start with me. That's the intro session. And we look at the aspects of your chart specifically related to money flow, codes of grounding, earning, investing, receiving, expanding. And so we have a roadmap, a flight plan that we do over the course of 1 week. And so the format is that each day I have a delivery of my download and what I have to say and share about each of those codes. And then at some point over the next 24 hours, they return back and share with me how it lands for them, what it lights up for them, any kind of like anecdotes that really affirm what I'm sharing and help to ground it for them. And we just do that back and forth dance over the course of a week. And then I have my cosmic compass session that I do that's 2 weeks because in addition to going through the 5 cosmic keys that we look at, I also create a video kind of mirror an example of a somatic practice that they then do where they center themselves in their chart and actually tune into spatially where they first met the sun, where they first felt the moon, like when they first took their first breath and had that imprint of those parts of their chart, like where they actually felt those. And as they're scanning around and tuning into each of those, tuning into the feeling and the mantra of what makes them feel the most connected and aligned with each. So it's a little bit longer to develop that, but that was the first session that I had before the shift that I turned asynchronous that was such a game changer in the way that I support people with astrology. Cause dude, astrology is a lot. Like it's like a maze and it's confusing and sure, it's fun to have a reading and get your mind blown. But if you don't actually ground it, like I'm a Virgo moon, I'm about practical magic. If I don't know what to do with it after, that was fun, but that was entertaining.
Right.
And I really want to support people to like use these keys and codes to be able to create their most aligned and fulfilled life because it makes all the difference. So yeah, with that one, it was like, how can I simplify and ground it into an actual practice that they can carry with them to create that like alignment practice over and over whenever they need.
I love that. That's awesome. Yeah. It's like when I was learning human design, it was like this, we were doing calls, but it was like then there'd be time for me to integrate. And then I'd learn a little bit more about my human design chart or my kids or something. And it was helpful because it kept it alive when I still was learning and not integrating and not really knowing how to use it as a tool. And then it's over time, then it becomes more of a way of being and more second nature.
100%. And that's why I'm like, why wasn't I doing asynchronous the whole time?
Yeah.
Like getting to do it over the course of a week or 2 weeks instead of like a 2-hour fire hose experience. It just like builds in that integration as part of the rhythm of it.
Totally. I know. I'm team asynchronous for so much stuff too. That's 90% of my coaching. And just like side note rabbit hole for everyone listening. I think to me, it's all about building and your offers and selling your offers the way that you enjoy buying offers and consuming offers.
Yeah.
It just makes it so much easier because you have the belief in it. I used to think I had to teach things live the first time. And I was like, when was the last time I showed up to a live training? I never show up live. I always want to watch the replay because then it's a time that I like. It doesn't interrupt my day. I can watch it on 2x speed. So why do I think I have to do something that the version of me buying it wouldn't even want?
That's such a good point. And that detail, you just said it, being able to turn it to 2x speed, that is my jam. I want people to have that option when they're consuming anything I have to offer because I want that in return. Absolutely.
Totally. How old is your kiddo now?
He will be 2 the end of the year. He's about 20 months right now.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Such a fun stage of life. You know, the people you see that have done something really successful or out of the box and are living a life that you find really interesting and inspiring. Do you ever wonder how they think or what's going on behind the scenes, how they make their decisions? I know I do. I've invested lots of money, at this point to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars, to get access to people like this. Not because I want to copy paste what they're doing, but because I want to get to know how they think, what moves they're making behind the scenes. And of course, because we're energetic beings, first and foremost, their energy alters my energy for the positive. This is exactly what I do for you inside Soul Mission, my private podcast full of transmissions that cause you to feel inspired, expanded, and ready to take massive action that aligns with your dreams and goals. The only difference is that you don't have to invest hundreds of thousands to get it. In fact, you can binge for free for 3 days. Check the show notes to sign up or DM me the word mission on Instagram to get the link and start letting my energy rub off on you. So let's dig into money a little bit. I'm just curious, whatever you want to share, like how much were you making as a tax preparer? Like how's it going now? We talked about a little bit of like money mindset stuff that came up, but if there's anything more that you want to add to that, I like have a little pin in my mind too to talk about seasonality, just because every tax preparer I know can't even respond to an email in these certain months, can't go on vacation, can't do whatever. Like it's all just like work. But then there's a slow season, and that's like such a different way of working than what you're doing now. So I know that was like 3 questions rolled into one.
That's okay. They swirled into, I know exactly where to go.
Great.
Yeah. So the seasonal grind of it, what finally made me get honest with myself that it was not, that it had expired in its alignment in my life.
Yeah.
Because when my dad passed 3 years ago, as I said, like us working together was such a big part of the draw for me. So my heart wasn't quite in it after that. But the tipping point for me was that I had my last tax season during my 4th trimester, the first season of my son's life.
Oh my gosh.
And as you just described so accurately, during tax season, it requires just 110% of your time, energy, and focus the whole time for a few months, as does having a new baby. Yeah. And so all of a sudden I found myself being pulled like more than all of me in 2 directions at the same time. And there was the positive silver lining angle that I can look back on and appreciate from that season that I had so much support.
Yeah.
My husband really stepped up. My team member took on a much bigger role. She was like all client facing and hadn't been before. Bless her. I could never have done that tax season without her or him. That said, it felt very unsustainable, particularly for my family. Like we pulled it off, but I was like, this is not sustainable for us at all. That was way too much on my husband on top of everything else that he already juggles. And the other part of it though, too, around having become a mama was like the side of it where my heart wasn't in it in the same way that maybe I hadn't been being fully honest with myself about. Once I became a mom, I was like, at that point, all I wanted to do was be with my baby and watch him coo and smile and anything that I didn't want to do just as much as that.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, how can we get this out of the picture? Like it just changed my standard of what I was willing to show up for.
Yeah.
And of course, there was the factor of how much money I was making, which I hovered under six figures. It depended. It shot way up during the pandemic. Actually. So for a lot of people, that was a time of downturning profits. For me, I got such a flood of people that were all of a sudden ready to get on the books and start filing their tax returns to get all of the perks that came with that time, right? The unemployment and the stimulus money and all this, things really shot up during that time, which I'm grateful. It was like going out with a bang.
Yeah.
You know, it was like getting to a point that felt really prosperous and profitable right there at the end. And while it was seasonal, the times when I wasn't in tax season, I worked at a much chiller pace. But what I would focus on, because something that I really geek out on and was another reason that I loved my tax practice, because it was just like an excuse to do this part of it, is like automation and tech and back end systems. And so every year I would take that time to just like refine and dial everything in even better. So I did work year round in that way, but it was like unpaid work when it was on. But it wasn't just seasonal work, it was seasonal pay.
Yeah.
So a big part of what I had become used to was that there was a windfall around every corner. So it wasn't so much about my yearly amount that stands out to me from that chapter of my life, but I lived like I was limitless with money because I knew basically it was a part of a do as I say, not what I do part of my relationship with money, right? Like here I am teaching my clients to be really mindful around their income and expenses. And while I definitely tracked mine because that came second nature to me, I didn't have to be careful at all. Oh, I'm also teaching my clients, of course, to put money aside for taxes.
Right.
But I didn't have to because tax season was when they were due. So that's when all the money came and that's when I would pay it. But the kind of unhealthy pattern that I got into was I used a credit card to buy whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, knowing that there was a windfall around the corner to bring it back to zero. And that was so I was always like behind, but in a way I didn't have to worry about. That was a big part of the shift as well, is that wasn't going to work anymore. I couldn't just limitlessly spend on what I wanted because there wasn't going to be a for sure scheduled huge windfall of money around the corner anymore. So that's been a big shift besides the actual downturn in income, which I've always, thanks to my mom, I can thank my dad for becoming the business person that I did and so many things about how I am with money. I can thank my mom for the kind of magic money imprint side of things where I just trust, even though I don't have this scheduled windfall anymore, I've never worried about money. Like my mom she just really instilled in me that everything's going to work out. You'll figure it out. If it's meant to be, like the money's going to come. And so of course it does. And so, things are different now and actually are a testament to how ingrained that belief is. Because there's not a for sure anything coming, but I still do trust and believe in that. And of course, I've had to adjust my expenses accordingly.
Yeah. Oh, I love that so much. And I think like for us as moms listening to that, it's so inspirational because I want my kids to grow up and say, I've never worried about money. And like mom really instilled that belief in me that everything always works out. That's really special. I have a mom that instilled like worry and anxiety and some conflict, or specifically around money. And my mom's awesome. Like she was doing the best that she could and instilled so many great things too. But it's really lovely to know that we can do better and that we can carry it forward, and that like you're the outcome of what a regulated nervous system looks like around money when that's what's imprinted in you in childhood. So thank you for sharing that.
Oh, thank you for pointing that out. That is so true.
Yeah.
And because the other thing that shifted, becoming a mama and starting a family, like this whole other chapter that I'm speaking of as a tax preparer, I lived in a little studio apartment. My expenses were not much anyway, which is why I could buy whatever I wanted. Like things are different now. There are more expenses. And through this transition of me letting go of my tax practice, there's been some stress in my relationship and in my family and my household around money. And it's been so cool to see like that ingrained belief play out. Like I still, even through what have been like some pretty hard times objectively, like I still really don't worry about it. And yes, I absolutely have her to thank for it. And I will remember. It makes me want to dig deeper and think about and ask her how she did that, because absolutely I want to instill that to my son.
Yeah. And speaking like from my personal experience raising kids in Southern California, where the cost of living is pretty wild compared to most places. When people say, oh, we just can't afford kids yet or whatever. I'm like, on paper, we weren't like, oh, this is great. We can now afford children. It's every step of the way. It was like, how will we ever go from renting to buying a house? Oh my gosh, we'll have to double what we're paying. How will we afford daycare, childcare? And then somehow you do. And then you have a second. You're like, how are we going to double that? That's a really big line item expense in the household. And then somehow you do. And it really, I think, speaks to more of the energetic work around money and like our kind of money thermostat, what's comfortable for us. And so it's like when those expenses go up, somehow the income rises so that you end up in a way like about the same. It's really fascinating how that works, but I've leaned on that belief at times where I'm like, okay, this feels really scary to commit to this new payment every month, but somehow the thermostat's still set. So if we're turning up the expenses, somehow the income will turn up too, and it'll all work out.
Yeah. And to your point, it's those commitments that actually call in the money to cover it.
Yeah.
That's one thing that we look at in cosmic currency. I think you just called it dials. Like we talk so much about that. I'm like, oh, you have both of these things in your control. So you just play with both. You make it a game. And one of the biggest things that it reveals for people or like shifts the way that they think about it is this conversation around like earning what you're worth or what you deserve or pricing your offerings based on worth. And one of the big things we focus on through just like the practical systems that we put into place in cosmic currency is no, you need to make you need to make your expenses. You need to know what your expenses are and make them. And then you need to know what you're aiming toward, what that next leap is you're going to take. And then you need to make that. Yeah. And that's what you need to know for what you're charging and what you're aiming for and like sales and that whole arena. So I think like the idea that it's a game has always really appealed to me. And I think both my mom and my dad, because neither of them had like traditional jobs, I think that they instilled in me is that it's a game and it's not about your worth. It's not about, I don't know, some of these things that people put on themselves around it. It's really just a game of matching income and expenses.
Yes. Amen. I love that. Like that practical, like groundedness to it, because mine doesn't even understand worth anyway. Put your self-worth in one hand and put your iPhone in the other hand. Which one feels more real to you? Which one can mind understand? So it's like funny that we attach so much to a thing that at a basic level, like we don't even really get it. We can't quantify it. I can't look at you and decide whether you're more worthy of something than someone else. And I can't even do the same with me. So it's like maybe not having that thing in, it's like putting, okay, this is a hilarious analogy, but like my 6-year-old was trying to match math facts with a 5-year-old. Like they were just trying to like one up each other. And JJ was like, oh yeah, what's 100,000 times a mountain? And the other kid was like, of course, that's 300,000. And it was this hilarious conversation, but it's coming to mind because it's like, what is 100,000 times a mountain? I don't freaking know. Why do we put the mountain into the math equation? And it's like,
for sure.
when we put our worth into the math equation and then we can't solve the equation.
And then we think we're bad at math.
Yeah. The math ain't mathing because you put something in there that's not part of it.
100%. That's so good.
That's so funny. This conversation has been so delightful for me, and I'm sure everyone listening wants to connect and follow along with you. I know you're amazing at sending out emails. I'm on your email list as well. So can you just share where people can connect with you?
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram at Lauren Poppins Raye, Raye. So you can connect with me on there. And then otherwise, cosmicbee.link/start here gets you to my website with everything else. So you can get on my email list. You can check out the Cosmic Cash Code session, my favorite way to start relationships with new clients, looking at your chart with your money. And yeah, I send out weekly emails, the Cosmic Current, with a bunch of goodies to stay connected with the Cosmic Current as you build and grow your business.
Amazing. We'll make sure all of that is linked in the show notes. And just as a final question, what has it felt like for you to be on your own joyous path to millions?
I love this question because it feels like the joyous piece is post pivot, right? There were things I loved about my tax practice, but the path that I'm on now, since pivoting to focusing on the parts of it that truly brought me joy and discarding the rest, make the answer to this really obvious for me, which is like the game that I get to play and be the primary player in. I've had experiences where certain things have been revealed to me, certain quests that I've been on that I played observer and like awe-inspired witness of. And being on this path feels like a version of that, but it's my whole life ahead of me. It's like a game that was designed for me and made for me, but that I get to co-create with the universe instead of it just being like ideas in my mind. I get to actually ground those into building structures around a business that like sets me up to be able to play this game for the rest of my life that I love to play so much.
Yes. I am obsessed with that answer. Like you're getting to play the best game of life with the universe. It's not the joyous path to millions. I don't know what is. So thank you so much for coming on the show. To everyone listening, thank you so much for tuning in. I just love this podcast so much. And it is such a joy to talk to cool people and hear their stories. So make sure that you go follow at Lauren Poppins Raye on Instagram, screenshot that you watch the show, tag us up. I'm at MMakesMoney. Let us know your top takeaways. Here are mine. Number 1, own your niche. Like, I love that she had this niche of, people that were living an alternative lifestyle and she got to do taxes for them. Number 2, bring all of you to the table. I was so inspired by how Lauren was like doing these tax appointments and also pulling up their astrology chart and doing these mini readings and just letting herself be authentically who she was in every environment. Number 3, pivoting toward more joy is always winning. Follow the things that light you up. Like she said, if it's not something that's giving me at least as much joy as listening to my baby coo, then I don't want it. And I love like that standard of living and really orienting and prioritizing that. Number 4, remove worth from the equation. Worth is not part of the equation for how much money you want to make, your cash flow in your business, how much you should charge, any of that. So let's just get it out of there. And number 5, get to know your astrology. How fun is it that we have this tool that's available to help us understand ourselves through the lens of money, but also our life purpose and everything else. And of course, if you want support on getting to know your astrology, now you have an incredible resource in Lauren. So go ahead and connect with her. As always, thank you so much for tuning into this show. Thank you for making it a top 2% global podcast. I appreciate you. I love you. And I will talk to you soon.
Thank you so much for listening to today's show. Changing the way that we think, feel, and talk about money is up-leveling the planet. I truly believe that. The ripple effect starts with you tuning in, and it spreads when you share this show on Instagram and Facebook. You can tag me at mmakesmoney. And you know what moves the needle the most? Taking just a minute to leave a 5-star review on iTunes. This show isn't free to produce, so let's multiply those dollars invested and help this show reach a bigger audience each week. So thank you in advance for your help. I really appreciate it. And until next time, I'm sending you all the magic money vibes on your joyous path to millions.